Okay, good morning, everyone. So a little bit of what I'm going to be covering today is just what is the automated modeling tool in Fusion 360. I'm sure those of you who use Fusion might have seen it pop up on your ribbon tool or ribbon bar. So I'm going to cover up what it is, how does it work, and I'm gonna go into the software for a little bit and do a demonstration on a few different designs I put together, and then we'll finish up with the Q&A. Okay, a little bit of introduction of myself. I am one of the application engineers here at KETIV. I'm on the support team. So if you have sent a support ticket, I might have been one of the application engineers to answer it. And most of my knowledge is around Inventor, Fusion, Vault, and AutoCAD. So we mostly support the manufacturing products. That's where our specialty is. I did graduate from San Jose State University with a mechanical engineering degree. I did cover a little bit what I do here at KETIV, and outside of KETIV and engineering, my biggest hobby is photography, which if you watched my other KBAs, I've had mentioned a bit about that and showed some parts on that as well, but not on this one. So. All right, so moving on. So what is automated modeling? So within Fusion, they added this new tool that allows you to give a certain set of inputs and then get a few design outputs, which sounds a little bit similar to generative design, but we're going to cover how they differ between the two, because there is quite a bit of differences between how generative design works and then how this automated modeling tool works. So how does it work? So your inputs, instead of the various inputs that generative design asks for, the automated modeling tool only asks for the faces that you want to connect and which bodies you want to avoid. And it gives you 6 different outputs. 3 of them are different designs where they look different. Their geometry is quite a bit different from each other, and then 2 alternatives for each of the designs. So you can see here on my 2 examples right here on the blue one, you can see the connection points where it connects to those pins are a lot more freeform modeling as opposed to the ones on the yellow one, which are more parametric. They look more like extrusions as opposed to freeform parts. So for each of the 3 different designs that it gives 2 alternatives depending on what you want. And for the outputs, it either outputs it to a body or as its own component. And then we'll see kind of how that differs in your timeline and where they show up and how you can leverage the design history behind each one of those options. So when would you use automated modeling? I think where it comes really in handy is when you're really just starting a design and you're not really sure of where you want to take that part or how do you want to start it. I know in school, whenever I would create anything, it'd just be mostly boxes and cylinders. And I think the way the automated modeling tool creates its designs is it uses a lot more freeform modeling, which allows you to get more complex designs as opposed to just getting boxes or cylinders. And opposed to generative modeling is the number of inputs you need, because at the start of designing a certain part or model or assembly, you might not have the information to run a generative modeling simulation because you don't have the certain weight of the or the load conditions for your part, or maybe you don't have the certain manufacturing process that you want to that you're going to end up using. So automated modeling helps you kind of start your part without having as much information as you would have had or that you would need for something to run like a generative modeling analysis. So how do you enable it? So as some of you who use Fusion 360 might have already had it enabled, but automated modeling, you can go under the Preview Features tab and you can enable it from there. Fusion allows its users to preview its features before they're finalized. So some of you may have turned these off, but if you don't have it turned on, you can turn it on from your preferences, and I'll show you where that window is in just a second. So moving on to the demonstration, let me pull up my Fusion. Okay, so if you don't see it right up here at the center of your design ribbon, if you can go up your little profile, go into preferences, and then you can enable it from preview features at the very bottom. Okay, so here I have 3 different pins that I want to create a certain part for that'll be able to connect these, and then I can run a simulation maybe on the part in the future. So if I go up to my automated tool, it'll pull up my window to select my faces. So you can see that if you don't want the entire pin to be completely selected for your faces, you will have to either split it or split the part. More than likely, you'll probably do a split face on this face for these 2 cylinders. And then for bodies to avoid, we don't have any on this design, but I'll have that in one of my next examples. So I'm just going to select my 3 faces. I would just want a solid body to connect these 3 pins. We'll go into new body, leave that, and then I'll go ahead and click generate shapes. And as you can see, they'll start populating here as they fill out. This one is a fairly simple design. So I don't have any faces, I don't have any bodies to avoid, and I have relatively simple geometry. So I'll just go ahead and show maybe one of these before I cancel out and do some changes on it. You can see here that these 2 started populating in here, and you can see they're showing up here shortly. The connection type between the first one is more freeform modeling, and you can see it changes between some of these other design alternatives, the solid that it's creating here. So the first 3 are going to have that more smooth connection between the freeform part and the pins I selected. But if we go to maybe the 4th, 5th, and 6th design, we do have more of a parametric connection between the 2 as soon as these are finished uploading. Okay, so here you can see that this one is more parametric than the 2nd design. And I'm just going to click OK for now. I created a new body for these, so it's going to show up here under my assembly timeline, and it's going to show up under my bodies right here. So this is the body that it created, and this is the design that I have in here now. And I'll go ahead and switch up my viewing properties so that we can distinguish it between the other parts. In our history down here, we do also have the option to edit some of these. So maybe if we perform a structural analysis on this part, and we realize that maybe we need to thicken up some of these cylinders, or maybe we need to adjust some of the freeform models in here. We can go down here and we can actually edit some of these cylinders. I can actually edit these if I want to, or I can go into my freeform tool and edit this as well. And I right click, edit my form. I can actually edit the body that it created for this part. So moving on to the next example. So I'm not going to have this run for every example. I do have a finalized one where I did separate out the faces of the design. So I'm going to move my timeline back. So using the two planes that I had, and they're hidden, so I'm going to check. The two planes that I had here in the center, I did split the faces on this example so that I was able to select just the edge of these two pins on the left and right. And then using the automated modeling tool, I was able to create a 3D solid to connect. And you can see that this one's a little bit more complex than that other one that it had pulled up in the first go at it. So moving on to my next example, I have this wheel that I want to connect to the base. So this is something that might go on a little cart, and that I would want to connect between the two so that the wheel can swivel around this little base. So once again, I wouldn't want to select this tool or this pin right here, because if I select this face, it's going to select everything even underneath this cylinder. And same thing with this pin, where I wouldn't want it to select this entire face even throughout the wheel. So I would go over to modify and then split face, and I would split this one with this face. So now I'm able to select just that bottom part. And then same thing with these wheels, where I don't want it to select the entire cylinder even inside of the wheel. So I'm going to select all these, so I have 3 different surfaces. Okay, and now in this example, I actually do have some bodies that I want to avoid. So I'm going to go over to automate, select these 3 different faces where I want it to connect. And in this case, I don't want it to go through this wheel, and I don't want it to touch this body as well. So I'll select those 2, and I'll just create a new body. And I'm not going to wait for this to load on this one as well, because I actually already ran this before starting out. So I'm going to pull up my design, and this is what it gave me. So I have my little connector here, and I have cylindrical faces that I chose as opposed to the freeform ones. And on this one, I actually created a solid component from my body. So when I go into my connector here, I actually have it as its own component that I am able to use in analysis. So I'm going to pull that up in just a second. So here I have my connector, and let's say I want to actually use this in an analysis. I can go over to my simulation tab, and then I can run a load simulation on this design. And then I can go back into my assembly if I need to, and then maybe adjust some of these connections. Maybe I want these arms to be a little bit thicker than they are and want less displacement. Or maybe I want to thin out certain parts of this design. I can go back and do that inside of my design tab. Close that. I can close this one out, and then I'm going to move on to my last one, which is this wheel assembly. So I do have this wheel here. I have a spring here that I don't want to use, and then I have two connectors that I want to connect onto this wheel. So for this one, I did also add some movement into this wheel because it's able to pick that up so that it knows not to create anything that would interfere at this position or at this position. So when I run this one, I'm actually going to run this one. So let's go into our automate. I do already have my faces split, I think. Yeah. Okay, so I did already split my faces, so I'm just going to go and select the faces that I want. And then for this one, I don't want it to create anything on this spring. I'm actually going to not select this one just so I could show you what might happen if you don't do it the way, or you just select the body. There's certain things that still need to be changed on it. Or if you're working on certain designs that are a lot more complex than this, you might want to use another body instead of this actual spring component to avoid. So I'm going to create this one. I'm going to set it as a new component, and I'm going to create shapes. And the main difference between setting it as a new component as opposed to a new body is where it shows up in your history. So if you saw on the new body, it shows up on the assembly level. So on the assembly level, you'll see in the ribbon here, you'll see the automated modeling tool, and then you'll see the design history behind that. When you create a new component, it's going to create the new component in your modeling tree. And then inside of that component, when you activate it, you'll see that history for the model. So if it's a body that you are planning on maybe manufacturing, or maybe it's a body that you just want to use as reference, you maybe only want to set it as a body as opposed to a component, or maybe just where you want to be able to edit it, you might choose body over component. I'm going to let this one run, and hopefully the first one pops up fairly quick. Okay, so this is kind of what I wanted to show you. So in this example where I chose this spring as the bodies to avoid, you can see that it actually created geometry inside and around this spring, which is not something that I would want. So you can see on this one, it created a solid body underneath the spring and inside of it, which is not something that you would want inside of your shop. So for a model like this, what I would recommend, for an example like this, what I would recommend is creating a solid body that covers the area you don't want it to interact with. So even though I selected the spring, it just avoids the solid body of the spring, not the area it uses up. So what you can actually do for this is you can actually just create a solid body. like this, where it covers up the space where the spring is, and then you can just hide it. So when you go to the automated modeling option, you can create the faces, and then when you select the bodies to avoid, you can just select that hidden body. Just like this wheel, when it rotates at its different positions, it's taking that into account when it creates the new component. So if we go ahead and generate this one, it's going to avoid that space inside of this spring. It's not going to create geometry within it or around these coils. I'll just let it run through and create the first couple of them. So here's one design. So you can see that this time it didn't create any geometry within that spring. So with this one, it kind of avoids that space that's in between there. And I'll cancel out of this one and show you the finalized one. You can see this one, I decided for it to go onto this bottom pin where this spring would connect onto the surface here. And you can see that it avoids this. And in this one, you can see that even though it avoided this body, it didn't quite do it the way I expected to, because it kind of pulls in on here. So in this one, I might go through and change up the geometry. I might lift this up so it goes up before it connects onto here, and then I might increase the size of the cylinder, or maybe it's something that I need to change on this solid body where it doesn't, it allows more room for it to connect onto it. Here, if I go back into the arm, I can pull up some of these design alternatives that it had. I can show you another one of the freeform ones. You can see here's one design alternative using those freeform connections where the connection onto those surfaces is smooth as opposed to rectangular. And then you can see it avoids the spring. And having that hidden body also allows you some control over the space you don't want it to go over. So in this case, maybe this space between the spring and this body is just too close for me. So I wanted to create design alternatives where it's not as close. So I can just go back, delete this automated model, go back and maybe change the size of this body so it's larger and it doesn't connect. It allows more space in between the arm and the spring. So if I were to do that, I would have a few different designs that I could use for this. You can see in this one, I believe I made this into a component. So if I pull up the arm, okay. Yeah, so when I pull up the arm on this one, because I created it as a new component, I can actually edit the freeform within this component, as opposed to having to edit it at the top level. And I use for this one. Yeah, so this one, I open up the component. I created this one as a new body and then exported it to a component. So you can see on this one, I don't get any of the design history down here. I actually get it up here in the assembly level. Okay, so just a bit of a review of what we covered. So we covered the automated modeling tool. It's one of Fusion's new tools, preview features that you're able to enable within your Fusion. How it works differently as opposed to the generative design tool, and how you can use it to kind of start some of your projects or parts, and when you could use it and how you can avoid some issues with it, maybe avoiding some parts or some spaces where you don't want it to create geometry, and how you can go back and edit it and leverage this. So within Fusion, how you can use it to also switch into the simulation tab and run your simulation, and maybe go back and edit some of the solids that you create with this tool. Okay, Christina, do you have anything else before we finish up?
No, this was great. Thank you so much, Marco, for leading the session. And we will see, if we don't see all of the participants at Autodesk University, we will see them at next week's session.
Okay, thank you again for having me. And thank you everyone who attended.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.